Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on behalf of a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media on this Wednesday, March 30th, 2022. Before we get on to a really full program this evening, just want to remind you can go to weather.gov to find out additional information on top of what I provide in this broadcast. It's a point-and-click map. First comes up the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii in the lower left, and it's a point-and-click map. You take your mouse, point on there, and you can pull up a forecast with any of the watches, warnings, advisories that are currently in effect. As of this mid-Wednesday afternoon, we have tornado watches. There's a regional severe weather outbreak occurring in parts of the central lower Mississippi Valley from southern tip of Illinois and southwest Indiana into western Kentucky, western Tennessee, down across Mississippi into the delta areas of the Mississippi River there in the southeastern part of Louisiana. And they've already had some reports of tornadoes, and that threat will continue into this evening. But what we have coming up is a different type of storm. A strong G3 class geomagnetic storm is forecast to develop this evening across the globe, and it would spark the potential for some very active auroras across the state. And so definitely, if skies are clear in your location, you want to get out this evening. Sunset time now, the fact that we are in daylight saving time, skies don't really get good and dark till around and after 10 p.m. But that any time after 10 p.m., certainly even past midnight, we could have some rather active auroras, and there's the potential for those auroras to expand farther south, even into the mid-latitudes across the northern half of the continental U.S. And otherwise, looking further ahead for temperatures here as the month of April unfolds. Once we get in the second full week, we are looking for temperatures to average near to below normal across much of the state, but not too much so. So what we do have potential for seeing some active auroral displays across Alaska tonight, and if not tonight, even going into the upcoming weekend. We have that strong G3 class geomagnetic storm that is forecast to develop this evening. Also earlier today, there was a 1.3 X-class solar flare observed. X-class solar flares are the strongest. We have C, M, and X, and X being the strongest. And I believe that is the first one I've seen reported with this particular newer solar cycle. So we have the new moon occurring Friday, April 1st, so skies are going to be good and dark now through the weekend. And again, with this other activity, with this X-class solar flare, if any of that is directed toward Earth, that could certainly spark additional aurora displays here as we head into the weekend. So what we got going on this Wednesday afternoon, just looking at the current stats, this is what was going on mid-afternoon. The aurora oval, the forecast there on the right, is just starting to enhance. It's not anything spectacular, but by the time you are viewing this broadcast, that thing could be really cranking up here through the evening hours Alaska time. Now off to the left is the planetary K index. It's a measure of how the magnetic field is disturbed. Right now, all day long, it's been no higher than a 1 or 2. But once that solar disturbance arrives and that geomagnetic storm really cranks up, it could soar well above 5, even 6. In fact, the forecast max is for it to reach a 7, which would be a major geomagnetic storm. So that could produce widespread bright auroras. And I want to thank Dave Percy for this graphic. It shows where skies are expected to be clear tonight. We expect the best chance long and north of the Alaska Range to the Yukon River Valley on up to the south side of the Brooks Range, even there along the North Slope and Arctic coast. Also, some pockets of clearing will be possible around the Anchorage Bowl on up through the lower Mat-Su Valley and into areas of the Copper River Basin. So if you do even have some breaks in the cloud, it'll be worth tonight getting out and checking out the sky. The depiction on the left side of the screen shows where the aurora is expected to be observed, and this is indicating with this stronger disturbance. We expect the Aurora Oval, the visible, the center of that, to be located over Norton Sound, kind of between Nome and Bethel, right over Anchorage and over Juneau. So again, if there's some breaks in the cloud cover, definitely try to get out here late this evening, early in the overnight period. In areas to the north, Tanana, clear skies, 24 degrees there along the Yukon River. Great spot to watch the northern lights. Shevek there in the southwest, partly cloudy, 34. Those are a few alto cumulus clouds, kind of a harbinger of that warmer air coming in aloft with the next frontal system and low that's sitting out there in the Bering. And then for areas of Kodiak, sorry, you're going to be getting more moisture moving in, stronger winds out of the east-southeast and heavier rains butting up against the coastal mountains. Temperature this afternoon, though, 39 degrees, but you definitely have some more inclement weather coming there Thursday and into Friday. Metlakatla, partly sunny, some breaks. There could be a little patchy fog in parts of the Panhandle where there is any clearing, so that could limit your chance of seeing the northern lights. But Metlakatla there was 45 this afternoon. And the only advisory that remains in effect is a blizzard warning until noon Thursday. Point Hope to Wainwright along the northwest Arctic coast there. That is ground blizzard conditions due to some blowing and drifting snow. Other quick recap, the avalanche that occurred in on Hillen Road there, South Fork of the Eagle River, near Eagle River. It's going to take a couple of weeks for that to be cleared. That happened on early Friday morning, March 25th. So latest estimates by the road crews are it'll take a good couple of weeks for that to clear out that section of roadway where the snow and ice piled up as much as 60 to nearly 80 feet. On the satellite imagery, we have one area of low pressure that's worked its way across the Panhandle and on up into northwest Canada. Some gusty winds last night in the southern part of the Panhandle. Still could see some 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts around Skagway this evening. And then back out to the west, we have frontal system and low pressures that are sitting out across the Alaska Peninsula back into the Bering. There's going to be another low lifting out of the North Pacific here in a moment, but we have a few lows that extend from the southeast and central portion of the Bering back toward the western part of the Aleutian chain. And by early Thursday morning, the next low is going to lift out of the North Pacific, heading up there toward Kodiak Island, and that low will deepen. It'll drop down to near 980 millibars or so Thursday into Friday. That's going to create some stronger winds, potentially some heavier rainfall along the eastern coastal mountains there around Kodiak. And that's going to spread a mixed bag of precipitation across the portions of the southwest interior along the southwest coast. As we get into Friday, that low just slowly works its way westward across the northern half of the Alaska Peninsula. And we'll see some stronger pressure gradient and winds set up across the interior there on the south side of the Brooks Range down through the Yukon River. There could be some gusty winds, again, some blowing, drifting snow along the Arctic coast. So no real change there as we head up through the end of the week. Looking at temperatures, though, we expect low temperatures generally above freezing there in through the Panhandle, near and just above. Same thing, the interior where skies stay clear could be a bit colder, getting down below freezing. Watch out for a few icy spots around the Anchorage Bowl, but temperatures Thursday afternoon across the entire region expected to get back up into the low in mid-40s, but more in the way of cloud cover. The cloud cover will rapidly increase up through Cook Inlet early Thursday morning and overspread the region. And that milder air that's being drawn a little northward from that low that's going to be approaching and just passing south of Kodiak Island on Friday. We expect lows beneath the cloud cover to be generally above freezing, and temperatures again Friday afternoon should generally get back up above 40 in many places, except for maybe up there toward McGrath. And then looking at the Arctic coast, chilly there, teens and a few 20s below zero. And then as we go through Thursday afternoon, temperatures should be around freezing. Fairbanks southward to along the Alaska Range, also 32 or so there at Nome, but temperatures will be in the single digits below zero along the Arctic coast. Still some teens to near 20 below Friday morning. North Slope, Arctic coast, Yukon Flats, there around Arctic Village as well. And then as we get through Friday afternoon, temperatures may cool a little bit in the Yukon Valley, lower 20s for highs. Coming back down to 28 there at Nome. Across the southwest interior, increasing cloud cover will keep readings near the freezing mark overnight tonight or just above it, especially out along any of the waterways, the Bering and the North Pacific. And then for Thursday afternoon, we should get highs in the lower 40s there at Bethel and Aniak, 45 or so at King Salmon, 44 at Kodiak. Friday morning, lows will be in the 20s there at Bethel and Antioch and areas further north where skies may hold on to some clearing will get down the single digits. But then Friday afternoon, we expect highs again could be back up at least into the lower to mid 40s along the west down slope side with an easterly wind there of the Alaska range, and 43 or so there at Kodiak. Temperatures are forecast to average below normal there across the western and northern portions of the state, April 5th through the 9th. And as we extend that April 7th into the 13th, as we approach mid-month, we do see that the northern two-thirds of the state should see temperatures average a bit below normal, including the Panhandle. And then as we look at precipitation there, April 5th through the 9th, precipitation may average slightly above normal across the southeast portion of the mainland, extending into the Panhandle, but no really big events are we anticipating, and that trend will continue there as we approach mid-month, April 7th through the 13th. We expect a broad swath of maybe slightly above normal precipitation centered on the Yukon River. So the main weather story is if you have any clear skies tonight, even partly cloudy skies, make an effort to get out tonight, especially around and after 10 p.m. up past midnight, and take a look for the northern lights.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
It's now time for your aviation weather for you pilots. If you have a flight you're thinking about planning here Thursday into Friday, the main weather player will be an area of low pressure that's going to take shape southwestern Gulf and pull up just south of Kodiak Island as we go on to Friday. Meanwhile, we'll start out with low pressure in through the central Aleutians central bearing. That feature will produce widespread IFR conditions around St. Matthew, the southwest coast, up to St. Lawrence. Thursday morning, we'll see an expanding area of IFR conditions there in the western, southwestern Gulf in the vicinity of Kodiak Island on up toward the entrance of Cook Inlet. Also pocket of IFR conditions northwest Arctic coast and also the interior coastal mountains of the Panhandle. Thursday afternoon, we see IFR conditions expanding in the Gulf and along at least the west side of the Gulf Coast, up through the southwest portion, coastline there, Bristol Bay, lower Kuskokwim Delta, and also along the entire northern Arctic coast from areas around Wainwright eastward through Katovik. And then on Friday morning, we expect IFR conditions to continue there along the Arctic coast. IFR also there through the southwest coast in through the Bering, and then pockets of extensive IFR conditions from areas of Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, east side of the Kenai, all the way on through, expanding through much of the inner channels there of the Panhandle Friday morning. And we should see a little, at least daytime, lifting of some of the ceilings. So conditions should improve a bit there in areas along the Gulf Coast, but we continue to see widespread IFR conditions along the northwest and Arctic coast in the far north. Anitukvik Pass should generally see VFR conditions on Thursday, as will Adigan Pass. Further south and west, Lake Clark is expected to stay IFR throughout the day Thursday. Merrill may see MVFR conditions become IFR. Rainy Pass also MVFR conditions becoming IFR with that moisture pulling in from the south. And Windy Pass will see MVFR conditions become VFR. As we go further east along the Alaska Range, Isabel starting out IFR, becoming MVFR Thursday afternoon, and Metasta Pass should improve from MVFR to VFR, as it'll be a little drier air in that area. Further south and west, Tenedo starting out VFR, becoming MVFR. Portage Pass will see MVFR conditions become IFR, especially the eastern half extending out into Prince William Sound, where it tend to be IFR conditions. And there in the far north end of the Panhandle, Chilkoot and White Passes will remain IFR. Because of that low that's going to be kind of transitioning from the North Pacific up into the southwest quadrant of the lower Gulf there, it's causing freezing levels to rise 2,000 to 4,000 feet there at the beginning of the Alaska Peninsula on up through Kodiak Island. And as a result of some moisture, precipitation going up there along the coastal mountains with the easterly flow, we expect pretty good chance of some considerable moderate turbulence in the vicinity of the entrance of Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait, the mountains on the east side of entering there the Alaska Peninsula, and then across Kodiak Island between 6,000 and 16,000 feet. Looking at the upper level jet stream winds, 30,000 feet, we have an anticyclonically curved due to the ridge. A couple of jet maxes up around 100, 110 knots there along the British Columbia coast and extending off into the North Pacific. Widespread winds out of the southeast across, say, Kodiak Island through the southwest coast on the order of 65 to 70 knots. 9,000 feet, we see a wind max upwards to 65 knots there on the lower west end of the Alaska range as you begin to move off of the mainland in there into the Alaska Peninsula, north side of Kodiak Island and the entrance of Cook Inlet. Also broad area out over eastern Russia and St. Lawrence. Southeast winds to 40-45 knots. And then finally bringing it down to 3,000 feet, we see a low pressure circulation just to the southwest there of Kodiak Island with some rather strong 50 to 60 knot southeasterly winds extending from off the western Gulf on up into the lower portion of Cook Inlet. So that'll lend toward turbulence. And as a result, we do expect the possibility of some isolated severe turbulence on the west side of the Gulf, especially just south of the Kenai Peninsula at the entrance of Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait, and the east side of Kodiak Island between the surface and 6,000 feet. Then a broad area of considerable moderate turbulence from western and central interior through the southwest and then extending back out across the central Aleutians from the surface to 3,000 feet.
We have a big solar flare coming in, so we're out here on an aurora hunt. It's a CME, it's dynamite, coronal mass ejection. It's when the sun, it kicks off energy and these explosions that are larger than the Earth, explosion type things, coming off of sunspots. And if that energy is pointing straight at the Earth, it gets caught up in our magnetic field, and that energy, electrons, come down our magnetic field, collide with oxygen up there about 50 or a couple hundred miles high, and that's what generates the northern lights. My job as the photographer and the aurora hunter is to be in position, you know, location, location, location. And I like to think I'm composing. Mother Nature, it's a bit of a teamwork thing, you know, she's got to put on the show, but I have to be in the right position and of course with the right tools and the know-how. I've stopped keeping track of how much time I spend out here in terms of hours. It's more in terms of weeks or months, or at this point years now. You know, it was always in me. Even when I was a kid growing up in the lower 48, I would spend nights sleeping on our trampoline, just staring at the stars. I'm in 4th grade and I'm going, wow, look at those stars. And I'd see how many nights in a row I could sleep on the trampoline. And I think my record was 23 nights in a row. So I was doing kind of strange things for an Iowa country boy. I can remember specifically the very first time I saw the northern lights. It was 1989, the peak of the solar cycle, and I was going to graduate school in Laramie, Wyoming. And all of a sudden we had heard the northern lights were out. It's like, what are those? I'd never really seen them before. And my goodness gracious, we were on top of a mountain in the Laramie Range and they were turning blood red. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And the very first picture I took, that was 1990. Now, an old film camera, Pentax K1000 on a plastic Kmart tripod. Took 2 shots on slide film and got them back. And I thought, oh my gosh, this beautiful green thing swirling about. And from that moment, I was hooked. When I realized that you could preserve the auroras on film, I just experimented a ton. I'd had a heaping stack of slides, the no good ones. The experiments gone wrong, you know, too dark, fuzzy, out of focus, too light. I had this huge garbage can full of excess slide film, and that was just the learning curve. Well, when I go out here, it's all about getting the shot. And my wife and I, we've called it the hero shot. But the hero shot is the one where you just come home and you go, look at this. And everyone goes, wow, and you feel like a hero. It's a wonderful feeling. You know, it's good for the ego, of course. It's good for the business. But if you kind of strip that away, it's good for what's inside of you, because that's really the hero moment in nature. And Mother Nature's putting on this show that is just mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. When I first resigned from my day job, that was in 1996, and decided I wanted to become a full-time aurora hunter, my goal from that moment and to this day still is to get one hero shot a year. I figured, and I'm talking the kind that somebody wants to buy from you and hang on their wall, where the auroras are extremely bright, very active, turning colors, where you can't believe your eyes. If you get to preserve a little sample of that with a photograph, well, it's what we call the hero shot. Wow, what a feeling. I mean, you're elevated, levitating, you're lifted up. Your spirits are so high that I love that feeling. And I think I get that so much from seeing cool things in nature that I will go way out of my way to find that. And I can, the next day, well, I'll be just laying there thinking about it and thinking how lucky I was, or how fortunate. Of course, I just spent 2 weeks sitting there staring at the sky and not seeing anything, so you got to remember that luck is kind of a relative term, but I still just feel incredibly lucky to be even in a position to where I could have been there, taken a photograph of it, and just mainly experienced it. Well, that feeling could last for days.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and we're going to start looking at the sea ice edge starting the date of March 25th. And if we advance 5 days later now to today's date, March 30th, you'll see that the ice has retreated to the north and west going back to the 25th, the 30th, and we see a number of areas of ice beginning to open up. Not that we've had extremely warm temperatures, though temperatures along the coastal areas there are above freezing, so we expect the ice to continue to melt along the edge, and also to be retreating a bit more, at least for another day, before winds develop more of a northerly component again. Along the inner channels of the southeast panhandle, winds will be out of the southeast, 15 knots, waves 2-3 feet, though it could be as high as 5 feet at Dixon Entrance. And then along the outer coast, look for southeast to east winds, generally around 20 knots, but as high as 25 to 30 knots, Yakutat westward. Waves generally running about 7-8 feet. And then on Friday, inner channels will see south to southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, waves 3-4 feet, maybe 6 feet down toward Dixon Entrance. And then onshore flow from the southwest and south at around as high as 20 to 25 knots, especially Yakutat westward, and waves generally around 12 to 14 feet. Across the northwestern portion of the Gulf, strongest winds Thursday afternoon will be there at the entrance of Cook Inlet, just northeast of Kodiak, 40-knot gales from the east, waves 14 to 15 feet. Look for northeast winds across Prince William Sound, waves 4 feet there, just 20-knot winds. But then Friday, still some winds upwards to 35-knot gales there at the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves of 13 feet. 20-knot easterly winds will continue there around Prince William Sound with 4-foot waves. Across Kodiak Island on Thursday, winds will generally be out of the east-northeast to 35-knot gales. The low-pressure system will be approaching from the southeast. Lighter variable winds 10 to 15 knots, especially Sandpoint, Cold Bay, False Pass. Waves, you have to get a ways out before they may be running 11 to 12 feet on the North Pacific side in the open waters. For Friday, the area of low pressure will be passing on the south side of Kodiak Island, moving toward the across the northern half of the Alaska Peninsula, so it's a counterclockwise circulation of 30 to 35 knots. Waves running 14, 13 feet there along the North Pacific side, and generally maybe 4 to 6 feet on the Bering side. Across the Aleutian chain, southeast winds on Alaska Dutch Harbor on the east side of the Aleutians, 15 knots, will be turning more to the west and increasing upwards to around 25 to 35 knots, especially south of Atka for Thursday afternoon, where waves on the North Pacific side could be running as high as 12 to 16 feet. For Friday, across the Aleutian chain, generally westerly winds around 20 to 25 knots, waves 12 to 14 feet on the North Pacific side, and 5 to say 7 feet on the Bering side, especially across the central and eastern Aleutians. Along the southwest coast, we expect ice in place. It may move still toward the west a bit, as we expect easterly components to the wind as high as 30 knots out of Norton Sound, as well as off of Emanak and around St. Matthew. And then on Friday, winds will turn a little more to the northeast and north, generally around 15 to 20 knots over the ice, though they could be as high as 30 knots there through Norton Sound, with the ice still in place. Along the Arctic coast, winds will be easterly, 25 knots on Thursday, 30 to 35 knots through the Chukchi Sea down through the Bering Strait out of the east with that offshore flow. And the offshore flow will continue into Friday, 25 to 30 knot winds at Gyadvik eastward through Katovik, and then areas along the northwest coast, Wainwright down through Point Hope. We'll see easterly winds to 35 knots, and then generally east to northeast winds 25 knots through the Bering Strait to the north side of St. Lawrence Island. On Thursday, we are anticipating low pressure to be located southeast of Kodiak Island down around 980 millibars. A decent system bringing in some heftier rains along the coastal mountains there of Kodiak Island, and we could see some turbulence and gusty winds there at the entrance of Cook Inlet for any of the flyers there. Otherwise, as we go into Friday, the low continues to back up westward across the western half, or I should say the northern half of the Alaska Peninsula, with a mixed bag of precipitation, as high pressure just sits up way north there in the Arctic Ocean, well north of the Arctic coast, with a ridge extending in through the Canadian coastline into central Canada. And other than that, the pattern will hold here as we go through the end of the week. Temperature-wise, we're not anticipating any super warm-ups, though some areas will see 40-degree temperatures, especially across areas of south central Alaska and coastal areas of the Gulf.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.